I stared at my phone in disbelief, the screen illuminated with my mother's name as it rang for the third time this morning. Mom never called me unless she needed something, and 3 calls in succession meant whatever she wanted couldn't wait. With a deep sigh, I swiped to answer. Tara? Finally. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Mom's voice carried that familiar tone of exasperation, as if my unavailability was a personal affront to her. Sorry, Mom. I was in a meeting. A small lie. I'd been staring at my phone for the past 10 minutes, debating whether to answer at all. Well, never mind that now. Your father and I want to throw you a birthday dinner this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just family. Can you make it? I nearly dropped my phone. In my 32 years of existence, my parents had never, not once, organized a birthday celebration for me. My childhood birthdays had been marked by hastily purchased cards and practical gifts like socks or school supplies, while my younger brother Jake's birthdays were elaborate affairs with bounce houses, catered food, and enough presents to stock a small toy store. Tara, are you still there? Yes, sorry. I'm just surprised. You've never thrown me a birthday dinner before. Don't be dramatic, Tara. Of course we have. The dismissive tone was so typical I could practically see her waving her hand. So, Saturday at 7, your father is grilling. Steaks. Your favorite. My favorite was actually pasta, something she would know if she'd ever bothered to ask. Jake was the one who loved steak. Sure, Mom, I'll be there. Despite my better judgment, a small flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe things were changing. Maybe, after all these years, they finally saw me. Wonderful. Oh, and we have something important to discuss with you, so don't be late. The hope dimmed slightly. There it was, the real reason for the sudden interest in celebrating my birthday. They needed something. What do you need to discuss? Nothing to worry about, dear. We'll talk on Saturday. Her voice had that syrupy sweetness she used when trying to hide something. See you then? She hung up before I could press further, leaving me with a familiar knot of dread in my stomach. I set my phone down on my desk and gazed around my home office. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the space I'd so carefully designed. My apartment wasn't large, but it was mine, the first major purchase I'd made entirely on my own, without a penny from my parents. Unlike Jake, who had received down payment money for his first condo, a new car when he graduated college, and startup funds for his tattoo parlor business venture, I'd made my way without financial assistance. I'd worked full-time through college, saved aggressively for 6 years after graduation, and finally purchased this 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood last year. My parents had been oddly quiet about my achievement. No housewarming. Gifts, no offers to help with moving or decorating, just a cursory, "That's nice, dear," when I'd shown them photos. Jake had received a full living room furniture set when he moved into his place. I pushed away from my desk and walked to the kitchen to make another cup of coffee. As the machine hummed to life, I tried to squash the childish hope that this birthday dinner might actually be about celebrating me. 32 years of experience told me it wouldn't be. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Mia. Lunch today? That new Thai place opened downtown. Mia had been my rock since college, the sister I'd never had. She understood my family. Dynamics better than anyone, having witnessed firsthand the stark difference in how my parents treated Jake and me. Yes, please, I texted back. Need to vent. Mom just invited me to a birthday dinner. First time ever. Says they need to discuss something important. Her response was immediate. Oh boy, that can't be good. See you at 12:30. First round of drinks on me. Sounds like you'll need it. I smiled, grateful for her understanding. At least I had someone in my corner. The Thai restaurant was busy with the lunch crowd, but Mia had secured us a quiet table in the corner. Her dark curls bounced as she waved me over, already sipping on what looked like a Thai iced tea. Ordered you one too, she said, pushing a tall glass toward me as I sat down. Now spill. What's this about a birthday dinner? I recounted the strange phone call while scanning the menu, still puzzled by the whole thing. And she said, "They have something important to discuss?" Mia's eyebrows rose. That sounds ominous, right? Part of me wants to believe they're finally recognizing my birthday, but the realistic part knows better. I took a long sip of my tea. They need something. I just don't know what yet. Maybe Jake's in trouble again, Mia suggested, not bothering to hide her disdain. She'd never been a fan of my brother or how my parents enabled his every whim and mistake. Probably. His tattoo parlor hasn't been doing well lately, according to Mom's not-so-subtle hints. I sighed. She mentioned last month that poor Jake might need to take out a loan to keep the business afloat. And let me guess, your parents have already maxed out their credit helping him before? I nodded. Dad took out a second mortgage 2 years ago to help Jake expand the shop. Mom let it slip during one of our rare phone calls. The waiter arrived to take our orders, momentarily pausing our conversation. After he left, Mia leaned forward, her expression serious. "Tara, promise me you won't let them guilt you into anything. You've worked too hard for what you have." "I know," I said, but we both heard the uncertainty in my voice. Despite years of therapy and conscious effort to set boundaries, I still found myself seeking my parents' approval. Some childish part of me still believed that if I was helpful, enough, generous enough, successful enough, they might finally see me as worthy of the same love and attention they lavished on Jake. "I'm serious," Mia pressed. "Whatever they're planning to ask, you don't owe them anything. Remember what Dr. Levine said about emotional manipulation? Dr. Levine was my therapist of 3 years, who had helped me recognize the patterns of favoritism and emotional neglect that defined my childhood. She'd given me tools to establish healthier boundaries, but family dynamics weren't so easily rewired. I'll be careful, I promised. Besides, I don't have much to give anyway. Most of my savings went into the down payment for the apartment." Mia's expression said she wasn't entirely convinced, but she let it drop as our food arrived. We switched to lighter topics, her latest dating disaster, my recent promotion at work, the upcoming holiday season. But the specter of Saturday's dinner loomed in the back of my mind. By the time Saturday arrived, my stomach was in knots. I stood in front of my closet, trying to decide what to wear. Something nice enough to show I cared, but not so nice that it looked like I was trying too hard. I finally settled on dark jeans, a forest green sweater that brought out the hazel in my eyes, and low-heeled boots. As I applied a light layer of makeup, I studied my reflection. I had my father's strong jawline and my mother's high cheekbones. But somehow I'd always felt like the odd one out in family photos. Jake had inherited our father's striking blue eyes and our mother's sunny disposition, while I got my father's serious nature and my mother's tendency to overthink. "It's just dinner," I told my reflection. "A couple of hours, and then you can leave." The drive to my parents' suburban home took 40 minutes, each mile ratcheting up my anxiety. Their house was the same one I'd grown up in, a spacious 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured lawn and carefully tended flower beds. Dad's pride and joy was the backyard patio he'd built himself, complete with a built-in grill and fire pit. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Jake's flashy red sports car already parked near the garage. Of course he'd arrived before me. Jake was perpetually late to everything except family gatherings, where he made a point of being the first to arrive and the last to leave, basking in our parents' attention. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought and made my way to the front door. Before I could ring the bell, it swung open to reveal my mother, dressed in one of her nicer blouses, her blonde hair freshly styled. "Tara, right on time." She pulled me in for a quick hug that smelled of her signature floral perfume. "Everyone's out back. Your father's just about got the steaks ready." I followed her through the house, noting the fresh flowers on the dining table and the good china set out, touches usually reserved for when important guests were coming. For a brief moment, that childhood hope flickered again. maybe this really was about celebrating my birthday. The back patio was warm despite the autumn chill, thanks to the outdoor heaters Dad had installed last year. Jake was lounging in one of the cushioned chairs, beer in hand, while Dad tended the grill. Both men looked up as we stepped outside. "There's the birthday girl," Dad called, waving a pair of tongs in greeting. Unlike Mom, who remained youthful-looking. At 60, Dad's 65 years showed in his salt and pepper hair and the deep lines around his eyes. Perfect timing. Steaks are almost done. Jake rose to give me a hug, his beard scratching my cheek. "Happy birthday, sis." At 29, my brother still had the charismatic charm that had gotten him out of trouble throughout his life. With his tattooed arms and carefully styled hair, he looked every bit the cool tattoo shop owner he aspired to be. "Mom said you brought wine?" I handed over the bottle, watching as he examined the label with a connoisseur's eye, another of his recent affectations. "Nice choice," he nodded approvingly, though I doubted he knew much more about wine than I did. "Let me get you a glass, Tara," Mom said, taking the bottle from Jake. "We're having steaks, but I remembered you like those roasted potatoes, so I made some of those too." I blinked in surprise. She had remembered something I liked. "Thanks, Mom. That's thoughtful." Dinner was served at the outdoor table, the food, admittedly, delicious. Dad had always been a skilled grill master, and Mom's sides were perfect compliments. The conversation flowed surprisingly well, focusing mainly on neutral topics, a recent family movie everyone had seen, Dad's golf game, a funny story from Mom's book club. Jake dominated the conversation as usual, regaling us with tales from his shop and his plans to introduce a new line of custom designs. I noticed he carefully avoided any mention of finances or business challenges, which seemed to confirm Mia's suspicion that he was in trouble again. After we'd finished eating and moved on to coffee and the birthday cake, store-bought, but at least it was my favorite flavor, Mom cleared her throat in that way that signaled an important announcement was coming. "Tara, we're so proud of how well you've been doing," she began, her tone carrying that artificial sweetness again. "Your promotion last quarter, that award from your company, and of course, your lovely apartment." "Thanks," I said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dad took over. "Which is why we wanted to talk to you about something important. Something where you could really help the family." And there it was. I set down my coffee cup, mentally bracing myself. "Jake's business has hit a rough patch," Dad continued, while Jake suddenly became very interested in the last bite of cake on his plate. "The location hasn't worked out as well as we hoped, and there have been some unexpected expenses." "Tax issues," Jake mumbled. "And the landlord raised the rent without warning." Mom reached over to pat his hand sympathetically. "It's not Jake's fault. These things happen in business." I waited, saying nothing. Let them lay it all out before I responded. "We've helped as much as we can," Dad said, his expression grave. "But with our retirement savings taking a hit in the last market downturn, we're not in a position to do more right now." Mom jumped in, her eyes bright with what I recognized as her brilliant solution look. "And that's when we thought of you, dear. You're doing so well. And that apartment of yours, it's lovely, of course, but it's just you there. So much space for one person." My stomach dropped as I began to see where this was heading. "We were thinking," she continued, "that you could sell your apartment and move into something smaller, maybe a nice one-bedroom or even rent for a while. The market is excellent right now for sellers." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "You could make a tidy profit, enough to help Jake get the business back on track, and maybe even have some left over for yourself." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked from one expectant face to another, landing finally on Jake, who at least had the decency to look somewhat embarrassed. "You want me to sell my home," I said slowly. "The apartment I saved for years to buy, so that Jake can bail out his failing business?" "It's not failing," Jake protested. "It's just a cash flow issue. Once I get past this rough patch, we're not asking you to give up everything, Mom interjected, clearly sensing my resistance. Just to downsize temporarily, for the good of the family. Jake would pay you back, of course. Like he paid back the $10,000 you gave him for his car? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Or the down payment for his condo? Or the startup costs for the business in the first place? That's different, Dad frowned. Those were gifts. This would be a loan. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Right, a loan that would require me to sell my home. The home I bought without any help from any of you, by the way. Mom's expression hardened. There's no need to be selfish, Tara. Family helps. Family. When you needed braces, did we complain about the cost? When you wanted to go to that expensive college, I had a scholarship that covered most of it, and I worked to pay the rest, I cut in. And those braces were a basic parental responsibility, not some extraordinary gift. Now, Tara, Dad's tone had a warning edge. Your mother and I have always done our best for both of you kids. Both of us? Really? The dam of resentment I'd carefully maintained for years was beginning to crack. Jake got a car for his 16th birthday. I got permission to use the family's second car sometimes. Jake got a lavish graduation party. I got a dinner at Olive Garden. Jake got help with his down payment. I got nothing. We didn't have as much when you were going through those milestones, Mom said defensively. And you were always so independent, so capable. Jake needs more support. Jake is nearly 30 years old. I was raising my voice now, something I rarely did. He's an adult who made business decisions that didn't work out. Why is it my responsibility to bail him out? Jake finally spoke up. Look, I know it's a lot to ask, but I wouldn't be asking if I wasn't desperate. I've put everything into this shop, except the initial investment, I pointed out, or the expansion costs. Those came from Mom and Dad. Tara, please. Mom's voice took on the wounded tone she used when she felt attacked. This is your brother we're talking about. Don't you want him to succeed? And there it was. The guilt trip, the emotional manipulation, the implicit message that I was a bad daughter and sister if I didn't sacrifice for the family. For Jake. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the patio stones. I need some air. Before anyone could respond, I walked to the far end of the yard, breathing deeply to calm my racing heart. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. This was why they'd arranged a birthday dinner. Not to celebrate me, but to soften me up for this request. The realization shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. After all, I'd suspected their motives from the start, but the confirmation still felt like a knife to the heart. Behind me, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see Jake, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically humble. I told them this was a bad idea, he said quietly. For what it's worth. But you went along with it anyway. He shrugged. I am in trouble, Tara. Not gonna lie. The shop's barely breaking even, and I've got suppliers threatening to cut me off if I don't pay what I owe. That's not my problem, Jake. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't take them back. I know. He kicked at a pile of leaves. I screwed up, made some bad calls, trusted the wrong people. Dad's been on my case about it for months. Has he? That was surprising. Dad rarely criticized Jake about anything. Yeah. Says I need to be more responsible, more like you. He gave a humorless laugh. First time he's ever held you up as the example to follow. I didn't know how to respond to that. After a moment, Jake continued. I don't expect you to sell your place for me. That's Mom's idea, not mine. I could use a loan, something, to tide me over until the holiday season. Tattoo gift certificates are big at Christmas. How much? I asked, though a part of me was already retreating, building the wall that would protect me from giving in. 20,000 would clear the most urgent debts. When I didn't immediately respond, he added, I'd sign something this time, make it official. I looked back toward the patio, where Mom and Dad were watching us, their faces anxious. My birthday? Cake sat half-eaten on the table, a sad reminder of the celebration that had never really been about me at all. I can't, Jake. I turned back to face him. Not this time. His expression fell, but he nodded. I figured. Worth a shot, though. We walked back to the patio in silence. Mom immediately stood up, her eyes darting between us hopefully. Have you, two, worked something out? She asked. No, I said firmly. I'm not selling my apartment and I'm not giving Jake a loan. Dad's face darkened. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Dad? The question came out before I could stop it, fueled by years of hurt and resentment. What specific thing have you done for me that equals what you've done for Jake? We raised you, fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. Those are basic parental obligations. I'm talking about the extras, the special things, the things you've always done for Jake, but never for me. Mom stepped in, her voice placating. Tara, you're being unreasonable. We've always treated you, children, equally. The absurdity of that statement broke something in me. 32 years of being the invisible child, the responsible one, the one who never needed anything, because asking felt too much like begging. It all came rushing out. Equally? You've never treated us equally a day in our lives. Jake got everything he ever wanted, while I learned not to want anything because I knew the answer would be no. Jake got second and third and fourth chances, while I had to be perfect. The first time, Jake's dreams were supported with money and encouragement, while mine were dismissed as impractical or not worth investing in. I was trembling now, years of suppressed emotion breaking through the careful composure I'd maintained. And now, on my birthday, the first birthday you've ever bothered to celebrate, by the way, you ask me to give up my home for him? Again? The high? Silence that followed was thick with tension. Mom's eyes were wide with shock, Dad's narrowed in anger, and Jake looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. If that's how you really feel, Dad finally said, his voice cold, maybe it's best if you leave. Robert, Mom gasped. No, Linda. I won't sit here and be accused of being a bad father by my own daughter, not after everything we've sacrificed. I looked at the three of them, my family, the people who should have been my strongest supporters, but who had always made me feel like an outsider, and felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. You're right, Dad. I should leave. I picked up my purse from where it hung on the back of my chair. Thank you for the dinner. Tara, wait, Mom began, but I was already heading toward the house. I walked through the familiar rooms that had never quite felt like home, past the wall of family photos where Jake featured prominently while I appeared mainly in group shots, and out the front door to my car. As I started the engine, I caught a glimpse of Mom standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of confusion and dismay. I drove away without looking back, tears blurring my vision, but a strange sense of liberation expanding in my chest. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself against my family's expectations. I had refused to be the invisible daughter anymore. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached the highway. Mom, of course. I silenced it and kept driving, heading not toward my apartment, but to Mia's place. I needed a friend tonight, not an empty home that my parents thought I should sell for Jake's benefit. As I drove, one thought kept circling in my mind. This birthday might have started as another disappointment, but it had ended with me finally finding my voice. Maybe that was the best gift I could have given myself. Mia opened her door, took one look at my tear-streaked face, and wordlessly pulled me into a hug. That bad, huh? She asked when she finally released me. Worse. I followed her into her cozy apartment, kicking off my boots and sinking onto her plush sofa. They want me to sell my apartment to bail out Jake's business. They what? Mia's outrage on my behalf was exactly what I needed. She disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 glasses of wine. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. I recounted the evening in detail, the initially pleasant dinner, the bomb they'd dropped about Jake's business troubles, their suggestion that I sell my home, and finally, the confrontation that had ended with Dad telling me to leave. So I did, I concluded, taking a long sip of wine. I just walked out. Didn't even take the birthday gifts they'd brought out after dinner. Good for you, Mia said fiercely. Those weren't gifts, they were bribes. And the fact that they threw you a birthday dinner for the first time in your life, just to soften you up for this request, that's manipulation, pure and simple. I leaned back against the cushions, suddenly exhausted. The thing is, a part of me still feels guilty, like maybe I am being selfish. They raised me after all. Don't I owe them something? You owe them basic respect as your parents, sure. But not your home, Tara. Not your financial security. Mia tucked her legs under her, getting comfortable. And let's be real. This isn't about you helping your family. It's about you helping Jake, specifically. Again. Mom kept saying, family. Helps family, I remembered. But when have they ever helped me? When have they ever put my needs first? Exactly. Mia topped off our glasses. And let me ask you this. If the situation were reversed, if you were the one in financial trouble, would they be asking Jake to sell his condo to help you? We both knew the answer to that. Jake was the golden child, the one who needed to be protected and supported at all costs. I was the responsible one, the one expected to make sacrifices. I just don't understand, I said quietly. What did I do wrong? Why have they always loved him more? Mia's expression softened. You didn't do anything wrong, Tara. Some parents just have favorites. It says everything about them and nothing about you. My phone, which I'd placed on the coffee table, lit up with another incoming call from Mom, the 5th since I'd left. I silenced it again. She's persistent, I'll give her that, Mia observed. She'll keep calling until I answer. She hates being ignored. Despite everything, I knew my mother well. Are you going to talk to her? I shook my head. Not tonight. Tonight, I need space. You can stay here, Mia offered immediately. Guest room is all yours. We can get drunk, watch terrible movies, and pretend your family doesn't exist. The offer was tempting, but I shook my head again. Thanks, but I think I need to be in my own place tonight. The apartment they think I should give up. I get that. Mia nodded. But the offer stands if you change your mind. We sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping our wine, before Mia spoke again. What are you going to do now? About your family, I mean. It was the question I'd been turning over in my mind during the drive to her place. I don't know exactly, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I can't keep trying to earn their approval or competing with Jake for scraps of attention. Sounds like the beginning of a boundary to me, Mia approved. Maybe it is. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the light play through the ruby liquid. Maybe it's time to accept that they'll never be the parents I needed them to be and to stop expecting it. That's a hard realization, Mia said gently, but a liberating one, I think. Yeah. I felt tears threatening again, but blinked them back. It's like I've been holding my breath all these years, waiting for them to finally see me. And now I'm finally letting myself exhale. My phone lit up again. Jake this time. I ignored it. One thing I do know, I continued, is that I'm not giving them any more money. Not a penny. They've drained their own resources helping Jake. They're not going to drain mine, too. Amen to that. Mia raised her glass in a toast. To financial independence and emotional boundaries. I clinked my glass against hers. And to birthdays that end better than they begin. We finished our wine, and I declined a second glass, knowing I needed to drive home. After a long hug and Mia's reassurance that I could call her any time, day or night, I headed back to my apartment. The night air was cool and crisp as I walked from my car to my building, fallen leaves crunching beneath my boots. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar comfort, the soft gray couch I'd splurged on, the bookshelves filled with my favorite reads, the kitchen where I'd taught myself to cook meals that nourished me. This was my space, my achievement, my sanctuary. I'd worked hard for it, saved diligently, furnished it piece by carefully chosen piece. The thought of giving it up for Jake's latest business crisis made my chest tighten with indignation. I changed into comfortable pajamas and made a cup of chamomile tea, carrying it to the small balcony that had been one of the apartment's main selling points. The city lights twinkled below as I settled into my favorite outdoor chair, pulling a throw blanket over my legs against the autumn chill. My phone, which I'd set to Do Not Disturb, showed a string of missed calls and unread texts. I wasn't ready to deal with them yet, but I did want to check if any were from work or friends other than my family. As I scrolled through the notifications, one text from Jake caught my eye. "I'm sorry about tonight. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. For what it's worth, I told them not to ask you to sell your place. That was crossing a line." I stared at the message, unsure how to feel. On one hand, it was rare for Jake to apologize for anything. On the other, he was still expecting some form of financial help, just not the extreme measure Mom and Dad had proposed. Another text, this one from Mom, was less conciliatory. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. Family helps family. Call me when you're ready to discuss this reasonably." Dad hadn't texted or called at all, which was typical. He'd always left the emotional labor of maintaining family relationships to Mom. I set the phone aside without responding to any of them. Tonight was for me, for processing, for self-care, for acknowledging the pain of what had happened, while also recognizing the strength I'd found in standing up for myself. As I sipped my tea and gazed at the night sky, I made a silent promise. To the little girl who had always felt invisible in her own family, I would protect her now. I would be the advocate she had never had. I would value her worth even when others didn't, and I would never, ever sell this apartment to solve Jake's problems. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the gaps in my bedroom curtains. I'd slept surprisingly well, the emotional exhaustion of the previous evening carrying me into a deep, dreamless sleep. As consciousness returned, so did the memory of the disastrous birthday dinner, but the sharp pain of the night before had dulled to a steady ache. I reached for my phone, curious despite myself to see if there had been more messages overnight. The screen displayed a staggering number, 17 missed calls and 23 unread texts, the majority from Mom. With a sigh, I scrolled through the texts without opening them, catching snippets from the preview. "Tara, please call me back. Your father is very upset. We need to talk about this as a family. Jake is really struggling, Tara. I don't understand why you're being so selfish." The tone progressed from pleading to frustrated to accusatory, a pattern I recognized from past conflicts, though we'd never had one this significant before. Jake had sent a few more texts as well. "Mom's freaking out. Can you at least let her know you're okay? Look, I know you're mad, but ghosting them isn't cool. For what it's worth, I think you're right about not selling your place. But maybe we could talk about other options?" Dad, predictably, hadn't reached out at all. I set the phone down without responding and padded to the kitchen to start coffee. As I waited for it to brew, I reflected on what I wanted to do next. The easy path would be to call Mom back, listen to her justifications and guilt trips, and eventually give in. Maybe not to selling my apartment, but to some lesser financial help for Jake. It's what I'd always done before. But something had shifted in me last night. The hurt of realizing that even my birthday celebration had been orchestrated for Jake's benefit had crystallized years of similar experiences into a moment of clarity. This pattern would never end unless I ended it. Coffee in hand, I curled up on my couch and finally called Dr. Levine's office, leaving a message requesting an urgent appointment. Then I opened my laptop and began exploring a topic I'd considered before but never seriously pursued: financial boundaries with family. Article after article confirmed what I already suspected, that my parents' expectation that I would sacrifice my financial security for Jake was unhealthy and inappropriate. That their history of financial favoritism had created a dynamic where Jake felt entitled to support while I felt guilty for having boundaries. That breaking this cycle would be painful but necessary for all of us. By mid-morning, I felt centered enough to text Mom. I'm safe and fine. I need space right now. Please respect that. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. Her response was immediate. We're coming over. This isn't something to discuss by text. My heart rate spiked at the intrusion. They'd never visited my apartment before, not when I moved in, not when I invited them for dinner 3 months ago, not even when I'd had minor surgery last year and could have used help during recovery. But now that they wanted something from me, they were willing to invade my space. No, I texted back firmly. I said I need space and I meant it. I will not open the door if you come. I turned my phone to silent and set it face down on the coffee table, then went to take a long, hot shower. The water soothed my tense muscles, but did little to ease the knot of anxiety in my stomach. My parents had never respected my boundaries before. Why would they start now? Sure enough, when I emerged from the bathroom, my phone showed 5 missed calls from Mom and a text. We're on our way. This is too important to ignore. I closed my eyes briefly, gathering my resolve. Then I texted Mia. Parents threatening to show up at my apartment. Don't want to be alone for this confrontation. Free for backup? Her response was immediate. On my way. 20 minutes. Relief washed over me. With Mia here, I'd be less likely to cave under my parents' pressure. She'd always been better at standing up to them than I was, unafraid to call out their favoritism and manipulation. While I waited for Mia, I tidied the apartment and made a fresh pot of coffee. The mundane tasks helped calm my nerves, giving me something to focus on besides the impending confrontation. The buzzer rang just as I was putting away the last of the breakfast dishes. I checked the intercom screen, relieved to see Mia's face rather than my parents'. Hey, she said when I opened the door, giving me a quick hug. Any sign of them yet? No, but Mom's last text was about 40 minutes ago, so they could arrive any minute. Mia settled on the couch, accepting the mug of coffee I offered. What's your game plan here? Honestly, I'm not sure. I sat beside her, cradling my own mug. Part of me wants to refuse to let them in at all, but that feels too confrontational. Sometimes confrontation is necessary, Mia pointed out. But I get it. What about boundaries for the conversation itself? What are your non-negotiables? I considered this. I'm not giving Jake money, not for the business, not for anything else, and I'm definitely not selling my apartment. Good, Mia nodded approvingly. What about communication boundaries? Are you going to set limits on how they can talk to you? I should, I acknowledged. No guilt trips, no comparisons to Jake, no dismissing my feelings. And consequences if they cross those lines? I'll ask them to leave. The thought of actually doing so made my palms sweat, but I knew it was the right approach. Or I'll leave if we're in a public place. Perfect. Mia squeezed my hand. You've got this, Tara. Remember, you're not being unreasonable or selfish. You're protecting yourself. The buzzer rang again, and this time the intercom showed my parents standing at the entrance to my building. Mom's expression was tight with determination. Dad's clouded with what looked like annoyance. Jake wasn't with them, I noted with some relief. Here we go, I murmured, pressing the button to let them in. Mia gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze. I'll follow your lead. Just give me a signal if you want me to step in or step back. The knock on my door came minutes later, 3 sharp raps that betrayed Mom's agitation. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. Tara, finally. Mom breezed past me into the apartment, her eyes widening slightly when she spotted Mia. "Oh, you have company. Hello, Linda." "Robert," Mia greeted them with polite coolness. Dad nodded curtly in her direction before turning to me. "We need to talk, Tara. As a family." "Mia is staying," I said firmly, closing the door behind them. "Would either of you like coffee?" "We didn't come for coffee," Mom said, though she did glance longingly at the steaming mugs Mia and I held. "We came to resolve this misunderstanding from last night." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I corrected her, gesturing for them to sit. "You asked me to sell my home to bail out Jake's business. I refused. That's pretty straightforward." They took seats on the love seat across from the couch where Mia and I sat. Mom perched on the edge as if ready to spring up at any moment, while Dad leaned back, arms crossed defensively. "We're concerned about your attitude, Tara," Mom began. "The way you spoke to us last night, the accusations you made, it was hurtful and disrespectful." "I was hurt by your request," I countered, "and by the fact that you used my birthday as a pretense to ask for it." "That's not fair," Mom protested. "We genuinely wanted to celebrate your birthday." "Mom, you've never celebrated my birthday before. Not properly, not like you always did for Jake." "There you go again with these comparisons." She threw up her hands in exasperation. "Why do you insist on competing with your brother?" Mia shifted beside me, and I knew she was restraining herself from jumping in. I touched her arm lightly, grateful for her presence but wanting to handle this myself. "I'm not competing with Jake. I'm pointing out a pattern that has existed my entire life." I kept my voice calm, channeling Dr. Levine's advice about staying focused on facts rather than emotions. "A pattern where Jake's needs and wants always come before mine. Where Jake receives financial support that I've never been offered. Where Jake's failures are met with help while I'm expected to succeed on my own." "That's not," Mom began, but Dad cut her off. "You've always been more capable than your brother," he said bluntly. "More responsible. We didn't think you needed the same level of support. So I was punished for being competent?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "Don't you see how unfair that is? How it taught Jake that he doesn't have to be responsible because someone will always bail him out, and taught me that I can't ever ask for help because no one will offer it?" Mom and Dad exchanged glances, a flicker of discomfort passing between them. "We never meant to make you feel that way," Mom said, her tone softening slightly. "We're proud of your independence, Tara, of how well you've done for yourself. But clearly not proud enough to let me keep what I've worked for," I noted. "Since you think I should give it up for Jake?" Dad leaned forward, his expression serious. "Look, we may have made mistakes in how we handled things with you kids, but right now, Jake needs help, real help. His business is about to go under." "And that's tragic," I acknowledged. "But it's not my responsibility to fix it." "Family helps family," Mom repeated her mantra from the night before. "Except when it's me who needs help," I pointed out. "Then suddenly everyone's too busy or too broke." "When have you ever asked for help?" Dad challenged. "When have you ever needed it?" The question stunned me momentarily. Had I really never asked? Or had I learned so early that asking was pointless that I'd stopped trying? When I was looking for my first apartment after college and couldn't afford the security deposit, I said after a moment's reflection, "I asked to borrow $2,000. You said you couldn't spare it because you just helped Jake buy his car." Mom had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I don't remember that." "I do," I said quietly. "Just like I remember asking for help with tuition my senior year when my scholarship was reduced. You said no then too. I worked 2 jobs that year, taking night shifts at a gas station while carrying a full course load. We had financial constraints," Dad began. "But you found $12,000 to help Jake start his tattoo business the very next year. I finished for him. That's my point. There's always money for Jake. There's never money for me." A heavy silence fell over the room. Mia squeezed my hand supportively, but remained silent, allowing me to fight this battle. "So what are you saying?" Mom finally asked. "That you won't help your brother at all? That you'll let his business fail out of—" "What? Spite? Revenge?" "It's not spite or revenge," I said evenly. "It's self-preservation. It's recognizing that I've worked too hard for what I have to give it away. It's understanding that if I bail Jake out now, it won't be the last time. It will never be the last time." "He's your brother," Dad said, as if that explained and justified everything. "Yes, he is, and I love him. But loving him doesn't mean enabling him to make the same mistakes over and over without consequences." Mom's expression hardened again. "So that's it? You're refusing to help? After everything we've done for you?" And there it was again. The guilt trip, the implication that I owed them. That my needs and boundaries were less important than their expectations. "What I'm refusing," I said carefully, "is to sell my home or take out a loan to give Jake money. What I'm refusing is to be the invisible daughter anymore, the one whose achievements are taken for granted and whose boundaries are ignored. What I'm refusing is to accept that Jake deserves more love, more support, more everything than I do." Dad stood abruptly. "This is getting us nowhere. Either you want to help your family or you don't. It's that simple." "No, Dad, it's not simple at all." I remained seated, determined to keep my composure. "But my decision is final. I'm not giving Jake money. Not now, not for this." Mom stood as well, her face flushed with anger. "I've never been so disappointed in you, Tara. I didn't raise you to be this selfish." The words stung, as they were meant to, but I refused to let them sway me. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom, but my answer isn't changing." "Then I don't think we have anything more to discuss," Dad said coldly, heading for the door. "Come on, Linda, we're done here." Mom hesitated, looking torn between following Dad and making one last attempt to persuade me. Finally, she sighed heavily. "Think about what you're doing, Tara. Think about what this means for your relationship with your family." With that parting shot, she followed Dad out the door, closing it firmly behind her. The sudden silence in the apartment was deafening. "Holy shit!" Mia breathed after a moment. "You did it! You actually stood your ground!" The reality of what had just happened hit me all at once, and I slumped back against the couch, emotionally drained. "I did, didn't I? You were amazing." Mia's voice was filled with pride. Clear, firm, not letting them derail you with guilt or manipulate you with accusations. Dr. Levine would be so proud. "They're furious," I said, the fact of it settling heavily in my stomach despite my resolve. "Mom has never said she's disappointed in me before. Not like that. That's because emotional manipulation has always worked on you before," Mia pointed out gently. "They're not used to you having boundaries. They'll test them, push against them, try to make you feel guilty enough to give in. It's going to get worse before it gets better." "If it gets better at all," I murmured, a wave of sadness washing over me. "What if they never speak to me again?" "Then that's their loss." Mia's voice was firm. "But I don't think it will come to that. They'll cool down eventually. And even if they don't, Tara, you have people who love and support you for who you are, not for what you can give them." I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. "I know. I never thought it would come to this, a complete break with my family." "It doesn't have to be a complete break," Mia reassured me. "It can be a reset, a chance to establish a healthier relationship where you're valued as much as Jake is." I hope so, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure such a relationship was possible. My parents had spent over 3 decades treating Jake and me differently. Could they really change now? Mia stayed for a few more hours, helping me process the confrontation and strategize for what might come next. We ordered lunch, watched a mindless comedy to lift our spirits, and by the time she left in the late afternoon, I felt steadier. Not Happy, exactly, but resolute. Clear in my decision and prepared to weather the fallout. That evening, as I prepared for the work week ahead, I received a text from Jake. Parents told me what happened. For what it's worth, I get why you're upset. But I don't know what I'm going to do now. I stared at the message, torn between compassion for my brother and frustration at his expectation that someone, me, our parents, anyone but him, should solve his problems. After careful consideration, I texted back, I'm sorry you're in a tough spot. Have you considered selling the shop and starting fresh? Or taking on a business partner who could inject some capital? His response came quickly. I don't want to give up on the shop. It's my dream. Sometimes dreams need to be adjusted, I replied, or postponed until you're in a better position. It doesn't mean giving up forever. There was a long pause before his next message appeared. Maybe. I'll think about it. Sorry again about the birthday dinner fiasco. It wasn't much, but it was something, an acknowledgement at least, that what had happened wasn't okay. I sent a simple thanks in response and set my phone aside. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that tomorrow would be my first day navigating the world with this new boundary in place. My first day knowing that my relationship with my parents might never be the same. My first day truly owning my decision to prioritize myself over Jake's needs. It was terrifying and liberating and necessary. I fell asleep that night with a strange mixture of grief and hope swirling in my chest. Grief for the family relationship I'd always wanted but never truly had. Hope for the life I could build now, free from the expectations and inequities that had defined my past. Tomorrow would be the first day of that new life. Whatever it brought, I would face it on my own terms. Monday morning arrived with the insistent beeping of my alarm clock and the soft glow of dawn filtering through my curtains. I reached for my phone out of habit, expecting to see more texts or missed calls from my parents, but there was nothing. Just the usual notifications, emails, news alerts, a reminder about a meeting at work. The silence was almost more unsettling than continued attempts at contact would have been. It suggested that my parents were either respecting my boundaries, unlikely, or had written me off entirely, painful to contemplate, but possible. I pushed the thought away and focused on getting ready for work. My job as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech company had always been my refuge, a place where my competence was recognized and rewarded, where I'd built a reputation based on merit rather than family dynamics. Today, I was especially grateful for the distraction it would provide. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and emails, my colleagues mercifully unaware of the personal turmoil I was experiencing. By lunchtime, I'd managed to push thoughts of yesterday's confrontation to the back of my mind, focusing instead on the quarterly marketing plan I was developing. When my phone rang during my lunch break, I tensed, expecting to see my mother's name on the screen. Instead, it was Dr. Levine's office, calling to let me know she had a cancellation and could see me that evening if I was still interested in an urgent appointment. Yes, absolutely, I said, relief flooding through me. Thank you. With the appointment confirmed for 6 p.m., I returned to work with renewed focus. Having a concrete plan to process everything with a professional made the afternoon more manageable, and I even found myself able to contribute meaningfully to a brainstorming session for a new product launch. As I was packing up to leave for the day, my direct supervisor, Elaine, stopped by my desk. Tara, do you have a minute? I nodded, wondering if there was an issue with one of my projects. I just wanted to check in, she said, perching on the edge of my desk. You seemed a bit distracted in the team meeting this morning. Everything okay? I was touched by her concern. Elaine had been a mentor to me since I'd joined the company 4 years ago, recognizing my potential and advocating for my promotions, even when I'd been too hesitant to put myself forward. Just some family stuff, I said, not wanting to unload my personal drama at work, but appreciating her interest. Nothing that will affect my performance long term. I'm not worried about your performance, she said kindly. I'm worried about you. You're one of our strongest team members, and you never seem to take a day off or ask for help. If you need some personal time, it's there for you to use. Her words hit me with unexpected force. Here was yet another example of how differently I was treated outside my family, valued for my contributions, yes, but also seen as a person worthy of concern and accommodation. Not expected to always be the strong one, the one who had everything together. Thank you, I managed, blinking back sudden tears. That means a lot. I might take a day later this week, actually. Good. Elaine stood, giving my shoulder a brief, supportive squeeze. And if you need someone to talk to, my door is always open. Not as your boss, but as someone who's been where you are. I looked up, surprised. You have? She smiled, a bit sadly. Family dynamics are complicated for everyone, Tara. Some of us just get better practice at setting boundaries earlier than others. With that cryptic comment, she left, leaving me to wonder how much she had intuited about my situation and how similar her own experiences might have been. The drive to Dr. Levine's office gave me time to gather my thoughts. After checking in with the receptionist, I settled into the familiar waiting room, flipping through a magazine without really seeing the pages. When Dr. Levine opened her door and called my name, I felt a rush of relief. Her office was as I remembered. It warm, inviting, with comfortable seating and soft lighting that created a sense of safety. Dr. Levine herself was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an attentive demeanor that had made it possible for me to open up to her when I'd first sought therapy 3 years ago. Tara, it's good to see you, she said as we took our seats. It's been a while. Your message mentioned something urgent? I nodded, then launched into the story of the past weekend, the birthday dinner that wasn't really about my birthday, the request to sell my apartment, the confrontation that followed, and yesterday's visit from my parents. Dr. Levine listened attentively, occasionally making notes, but mostly maintaining eye contact and nodding to show she was following. And now they're not contacting me at all, I concluded. Which is almost worse than if they were still trying to pressure me. At least then I'd know where I stand. It sounds like you handled a very difficult situation with remarkable clarity and strength, Dr. Levine observed. You set a boundary and maintained it even in the face of significant emotional pressure. That's impressive progress from where you were when we first started working together. Her validation warmed me. It didn't feel impressive. It felt terrible. I've never seen my parents so angry with me. My mom said she was disappointed in me. That's a common tactic when guilt and manipulation aren't working, Dr. Levine noted. The shift to expressing disappointment is meant to make you question yourself, to make you feel like you've failed some moral test. But ask yourself, is it really wrong to protect your financial security? To expect to be treated with the same consideration as your brother? No, I said firmly. It's not wrong at all. Exactly. She smiled approvingly. Now, let's talk about what their silence might mean. It could be a cooling off period, time they need to process that their usual tactics didn't work. Or it could be what we call a silent treatment, a punishment designed to make you anxious enough to reach out and apologize first, even though you've done nothing wrong. It feels like the second one, I admitted. They've never given me space when I've asked for it before. They've always pushed and pushed until I gave in. And how do you want to respond to this silence? I considered the question carefully. I don't want to break first. I don't want to apologize for having a boundary, but I also don't want a permanent rupture with my family. Those are valid feelings, Dr. Levine assured me. The good news is, this doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can maintain your boundary about not providing financial assistance while still being open to rebuilding a relationship with your parents on new, healthier terms. How? The question came out more desperately than I intended. How do I do that when they see any limit I set as a personal betrayal? By being consistent, she replied. By showing them through your actions, repeatedly, that your boundaries are firm, But your door isn't closed. And by being prepared for them to test those boundaries many times before they accept them. We spent the rest of the session developing strategies for various scenarios. What I would say if my parents reached out with another financial request. How I would respond if they tried to use holidays or family events to pressure me. What boundaries I might set around communication itself. One last thing, Dr. Levine said as our time drew to a close. I want you to consider what you need from them going forward, not what you wish they could be. We've discussed the importance of accepting who they actually are, but what specific behaviors would make a relationship with them sustainable for you? It was a thought-provoking question, one I promised to reflect on before our next session, which we scheduled for the following week. As I drove home, I felt more centered than I had since the birthday dinner. The path ahead wasn't clear, but at least I had a compass now, a sense of what I was working toward and what I could let go of. My phone rang just as I was pulling into my apartment complex's parking garage. Jake's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering, steeling myself for another attempt at persuasion. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Hey, sis." His voice sounded tired. "Got a minute?" "Sure. What's up?" "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about adjusting dreams, not giving them up." He paused. "I talked to this guy who's been wanting to buy into the shop for a while. He's got some capital and experience running a business, which I definitely don't." I was genuinely surprised. "That sounds promising. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I might do it. Sell him a 49% stake, use the money to clear the debts, and let him handle the business side while I focus on the art." Another pause. "It means admitting I can't do it all myself, which kinda sucks, but it might save the shop." "Jake, that's actually a really mature decision," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. He laughed, a short, self-deprecating sound. "Yeah, well, turns out when you can't count on a bailout, you have to get creative. Who knew?" There was something different in his tone, a lack of the defensive edge I was used to hearing when he discussed his business challenges. For the first time in our adult lives, it felt like we were having a conversation as equals rather than as the golden child and the overlooked sister. "For what it's worth," he continued, "I think you were right to say no to all of it. I shouldn't have let Mom and Dad put you in that position, and I definitely shouldn't have asked you for money after everything they've already done for me that they never did for you." The acknowledgement, so unexpected and so long overdue, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." "Yeah, well," he sounded embarrassed now. "Just wanted you to know I'm figuring it out. You don't have to worry about me ending up on your couch or anything." I wasn't worried, I assured him. "You've always landed on your feet somehow." "True." Some of his usual cockiness returned. "Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. You okay after yesterday? Mom and Dad were pretty bent out of shape when they got home." "I'm processing," I said honestly. "It's hard, but I think it was necessary." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. "Listen, I know we've never been super close, but if you need anything, I can't offer money obviously, but I'm here, that's all." It wasn't a dramatic declaration of changed behavior or a promise to be a better brother, but in its understated way, it was maybe the most genuine connection Jake and I had shared in years. "Thanks, Jake. That goes both ways. I hope the partnership works out." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a few minutes, processing the unexpected turn the conversation had taken. Jake, of all people, had been the first to respect my boundary, the first to acknowledge the imbalance in how we'd been treated. It wasn't the family member I would have predicted would show growth, but I was grateful for it nonetheless. As I finally made my way up to my apartment, I felt a small but significant shift in my perspective. Perhaps this crisis, painful as it was, could be the catalyst for not just a reset in my relationship with my parents, but also a new beginning with Jake. Not as the golden child and the afterthought, but as two adults with their own strengths and challenges able to support each other in ways that didn't require one to sacrifice for the other. It was a hopeful thought to end a tumultuous day, a small light in what had felt like an endless tunnel of family complications. The rest of the week passed in a strange new normal. My parents maintained their silence, neither calling nor texting, while Jake sent occasional updates about his negotiations with the potential business partner. Work provided a welcome structure, and I found myself more focused and decisive than usual, as if the energy I'd previously spent trying to earn my parents' approval was now available for other purposes. By Friday, I'd made a decision I'd been contemplating for months. I would apply for the senior marketing director position that had opened up with our company's expansion. It was a significant step up, one I'd hesitated to pursue out of a deep-seated fear of failure, a fear I now recognized was rooted in my family dynamics. If I tried and failed, I'd be proving that I wasn't as capable as everyone thought, that maybe Jake deserved the preferential treatment after all. But the events of the past week had shifted something fundamental in how I saw myself. If I could stand up to my parents, I could certainly handle a job application that might end in rejection. I submitted my materials that afternoon, feeling a surge of pride as I clicked the send button. Whatever the outcome, I had taken another step toward claiming my own life, making decisions based on what I wanted rather than on old fears and patterns. As I was leaving the office, Elaine caught up with me in the parking lot. "Just saw your application come through," she said with a smile. "I was hoping you'd go for it." "You knew about the position before it was posted?" I asked, surprised. "I recommended you for it," she admitted. "The expansion team asked who I thought could handle the increased responsibility. Your name was the first that came to mind." The casual validation stunned me. Thank you. That means a lot. You've earned it, Tara. You're one of the most capable people in this company." She unlocked her car, then paused. "By the way, how are things with the family situation? Any better?" "Different," I said after a moment's consideration. "Not necessarily better, but clearer, maybe. I'm still finding my footing." She nodded understandingly. "That's how it goes, one day at a time." With a wave, she got into her car and drove away, leaving me with her words echoing in my mind. One day at a time. It was how I'd approached the past week, focusing on the immediate challenges rather than trying to predict or control the long-term outcomes with my family. And it was working in its way. Each day I didn't cave to pressure or guilt was a day I grew stronger in my resolve. That evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner for myself, my phone rang with a familiar but unexpected name on the screen. Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister. We weren't particularly close. She lived across the country and visited only occasionally, but we'd always gotten along well during family gatherings. "Aunt Sarah? This is a surprise." "Tara, honey, how are you?" Her voice carried the slight southern drawl she'd picked up during years living in Georgia, despite having been raised in the same northern state as my mother. "I'm good," I said cautiously, wondering if she was calling as my mother's proxy. "How are you?" "Oh, you know, same as ever. Keeping busy with the gallery, trying to convince your uncle he's too old to be climbing ladders to clean the gutters himself." She chuckled. "But I didn't call to talk about us. I spoke with your mother yesterday. There it was. I braced myself for the guilt trip by proxy. "I see," I said neutrally. "And how is she?" "Stubborn as a mule and twice as unreasonable," Aunt Sarah replied, surprising me. "Always has been, even when we were kids. She told me what happened with your birthday dinner and Jake's business." "She did?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. My mother rarely discussed family conflicts with outsiders, preferring to maintain an image of perfect harmony. She did. Though I suspect I got her version of events, which is why I wanted to hear yours. If you're comfortable sharing, that is. The unexpected invitation to tell my side was so disarming that I found myself recounting the whole story. Not just the birthday dinner disaster, but the years of differential treatment, the financial support Jake had received while I'd struggled on my own, and finally, my decision to stop enabling the pattern. Aunt Sarah listened without interruption, making only occasional sounds of acknowledgement to show she was still on the line. When I finished, there was a brief silence before she spoke. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. Your mother has always had a blind spot when it comes to your brother. Even when you were little, I noticed it, but it wasn't my place to say anything. You noticed? The revelation that someone else had seen it, even back then, was strangely validating. Of course I did. Anyone with eyes could see it. The way she'd rush to help Jake with something, but tell you to figure it out yourself. The way your father would beam with pride over Jake's mediocre report card, but barely glance at your straight A's. She sighed. I brought it up once, years ago, when you were maybe 10 or 11. Your mother got so defensive I didn't dare mention it again. I closed my eyes, imagining a younger version of Aunt Sarah trying to advocate for me, being shut down by my mother's refusal to acknowledge the disparity. Thank you for trying, I said softly, even back then. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing now, she continued. Setting boundaries is hard, especially with family, but sometimes it's necessary. Your mother will come around eventually. She's just not used to you standing up for yourself. Do you really think she'll come around? I couldn't help the hopeful note in my voice. She and Dad seemed pretty set on cutting me off unless I helped Jake. Oh, they're bluffing, Aunt Sarah said confidently. Your mother would never cut off contact with her only daughter. She's just waiting to see if the silent treatment will make you cave. It always has before, hasn't it? Usually within days, I admitted. Well, this time hold firm. She needs to learn that you're a grown woman with your own life and priorities, not an extension of her or a resource for Jake. Her voice softened. And honey, I'm proud of you. It takes courage to break patterns that have been in place your whole life. The unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Aunt Sarah. That means more than you know. We chatted for a few more minutes about lighter topics before saying goodbye, with promises to keep in touch more regularly. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, reflecting on the conversation. Aunt Sarah's perspective had given me something I hadn't realized I needed. External validation that what I'd experienced was real, not just my oversensitive interpretation. That the favoritism had been obvious even to others, and that my decision to establish boundaries now was reasonable and healthy. It was another piece of the puzzle falling into place, helping me rebuild my understanding of my family and my place in it. Not as the invisible daughter who would always come second to Jake, but as a person worthy of equal consideration and respect. A person who could say no when saying yes would harm her own well-being. That night, I slept better than I had all week, the weight of doubt and second-guessing lightened by Aunt Sarah's support. Whatever happened next with my parents, I knew I wasn't crazy for seeing what I'd seen or for feeling what I felt. And that knowledge was its own form of freedom. The weekend passed peacefully, with no contact from my parents and only a brief text from Jake confirming that the negotiations with his potential business partner were progressing well. I used the time to catch up on household tasks I'd been neglecting, meet Mia for a long overdue brunch, and start researching a digital marketing certification that would strengthen my application for the senior position. By Sunday evening, I realized, with some surprise, that I hadn't spent the entire weekend anxiously checking my phone or rehearsing conversations with my parents in my head. The space I'd created by setting boundaries was allowing me to focus on my own life and goals in a way I rarely had before. Monday morning brought an unexpected email from the HR director asking if I could come in for an interview for the senior marketing director position that Wednesday. The quick response to my application was encouraging. They must have seen something in my candidacy worth pursuing promptly. As I confirmed the interview time, I found myself wondering if I should share the news with my parents. In the past, I would have called immediately, seeking their approval and validation. But now I hesitated. Would they even care? Or would they find some way to diminish the achievement or relate it back to Jake somehow? In the end, I decided to keep it to myself for now. This opportunity was mine, something I'd earned through my own hard work and abilities. I didn't need external validation to make it meaningful. I was just finishing up a project plan when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be related to work, I answered. "Is this Tara Mitchell?" a male voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Ms. Mitchell, this is Robert Kendall from First National Bank. I'm calling because your parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, have listed you as their emergency financial contact." My stomach dropped. "What's happened?" "Nothing urgent," he assured me quickly. "But we've noticed some concerning activity on their accounts in recent months and have been trying to reach them to discuss it. They haven't returned our calls, so as their designated contact, we're reaching out to you." "Concerning activity?" I echoed, my mind racing with possibilities. "Yes, there have been numerous large withdrawals far outside their usual spending patterns. In the past 6 months, they've depleted almost 60% of their retirement savings. As their financial advisor, I'm concerned about the sustainability of these withdrawals. 60% of their retirement savings in 6 months. The implications were staggering. Have they explained these withdrawals to you?" "Initially, yes. Mr. Mitchell mentioned helping their son with a business venture, but the withdrawals have continued and increased in frequency, which is why I've been trying to schedule a financial review meeting." "I see." I took a deep breath, processing this information. "Mr. Kendall, I appreciate you contacting me, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do. I can't control my parents' financial decisions." "Of course not," he agreed. "But perhaps you could encourage them to return my calls? At the current rate of withdrawal, their retirement funds will be completely depleted within a year. They're both in their 60s. This could have serious consequences for their long-term security." "I'll mention it to them when I speak to them next," I said, not wanting to explain the current estrangement. "But I can't promise anything." After ending the call, I sat at my desk, stunned by this new piece of the puzzle. My parents had been systematically draining their retirement savings to prop up Jake's failing business far more extensively than they'd admitted to me, or possibly even to Jake himself. The request for me to sell my apartment took on a new, more desperate dimension. They weren't just trying to help Jake, they were trying to stop the bleeding of their own finances before it was too late. My first instinct was to call them immediately, but I paused, considering Dr. Levine's advice about maintaining boundaries. If I reached out now, in a panic over their financial situation, it would undermine the very boundary I'd been working to establish. Instead, I texted Jake. "Need to talk to you about something important. Can you call when you have a minute?" His response came quickly. "In a meeting with the lawyer and potential partner. Can I call in about an hour?" "Yes, that's fine," I replied. "Nothing to panic about, but I need to share some information with you." True to his word, Jake called almost exactly an hour later. "What's up, sis? You sounded serious." I took a deep breath and relayed the call from the bank advisor, trying to stick to the facts without adding emotional interpretation. Jake was silent for so long after I finished that I thought we might have lost the connection. "Jake, are you still there?" "Yeah," he said finally, his voice unnaturally tight. "Yeah, I'm here. I had no idea they were taking that much from their retirement. They told me they were helping with a little extra from their savings, but 60%? That's... Jesus, Tara. Did you know they had named me as their emergency financial contact?" I asked, still puzzled by that detail. "No," he admitted. "But it makes sense in a weird way. They've always seen you as the responsible one with money. Ironic. Considering they're asking you to be financially irresponsible to bail me out." There was a new note in his voice, a self-awareness that had been missing in our previous conversations. "What are you going to do with this information?" I asked cautiously. He sighed heavily. "Look, the deal with this potential partner is nearly finalized. He's offering enough to clear the most pressing debts and stabilize the business. I'm going to make sure part of that money goes back to Mom and Dad. Not all of it. I can't replace 60% of their retirement savings, but enough to help. And then I'm going to have a serious conversation with them about not giving me any more money. Ever. His determination surprised me. That's a big step, Jake. Yeah, well, apparently I've been taking advantage of their generosity without realizing how far it had gone. That stops now. He paused. And Tara? I'm sorry for everything. For the birthday dinner ambush, for all the years they helped me but not you. I wasn't completely oblivious to it, but I didn't speak up either. That makes me complicit. The apology, so unexpected and sincere, momentarily robbed me of speech. Thank you, I finally managed. That means a lot. We talked for a few more minutes about his partnership deal and my upcoming job interview, the conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. When we hung up, I felt a cautious optimism that perhaps my relationship with Jake, at least, could evolve into something healthier. The question of what to do about my parents lingered. Part of me wanted to reach out, to express concern about their financial situation and offer to help them develop a plan for the future that didn't involve continually bailing out Jake. But another part knew that any contact initiated by me would be interpreted as surrender, as an admission that I couldn't maintain my boundary. In the end, I decided to wait. Jake would be speaking with them soon enough, and perhaps his new awareness of the situation would lead to changes I couldn't effect myself. My role now was to maintain the boundary I'd established, to continue building my own life independent of their approval or assistance. As I prepared for my interview on Wednesday, I reflected on how much had changed in just over a week. The birthday dinner that had started as yet another disappointment had become the catalyst for transformation, not just in my relationship with my family, but in how I viewed myself and my worth. For the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based solely on what was right for me, without the undercurrent of seeking parental approval or compensating for a lifetime of being secondary to Jake. It was liberating, terrifying, and long overdue. Whatever happened next with my family, that newfound independence was a gift I had given myself, a gift that no one, not even my parents, could take away. Wednesday's interview went remarkably well. The expansion team seemed impressed with my portfolio and vision for the department, and the rapport I established with the executive team left me cautiously optimistic about my chances. As I was leaving the building, Elaine caught up with me in the hallway. "How did it go?" she asked, falling into step beside me. "Good, I think," I replied. They asked thoughtful questions, and I felt prepared for all of them. "I heard you knocked it out of the park," she said with a knowing smile. "Word travels fast around here." A warm sense of pride bloomed in my chest. "That's good to hear. When do you think they'll make a decision?" "Probably by the end of next week. They're interviewing one more candidate on Friday, but between us," she lowered her voice, "you're the one to beat." "Thanks for letting me know," I said, genuinely touched by her continued support. "And thanks again for recommending me." "You did all the hard work," she reminded me. "I just pointed it out to people who needed to see it." As I walked to my car, I found myself reflecting on the difference between Elaine's straightforward acknowledgement of my abilities and the constant need to prove myself I'd experienced throughout my childhood. How different might my early career have been if I'd grown up with that kind of validation? If I hadn't spent years doubting my worth and capabilities? The thought was simultaneously sad and liberating. I couldn't change the past, but I could certainly shape my future. A future where I surrounded myself with people who saw and valued me for who I actually was. My phone buzzed with a text as I was starting my car. Jake again. Had the talk with Mom and Dad. It didn't go great. Can I call you tonight? I texted back a quick affirmative, curiosity and apprehension mingling as I drove home. What could "didn't go great" mean in this context? Jake called shortly after I'd finished dinner. "Hey," he said, sounding exhausted. "Got time to talk?" "Of course. What happened with Mom and Dad?" He sighed heavily. "Well, I went over there last night, told them about the partnership deal, and explained that part of the money would be going back to them to help with their retirement savings." "That sounds reasonable," I noted. "How did they react?" Mom started crying, saying she was proud of me for being so thoughtful. Dad got all quiet, which you know is never a good sign. Jake's voice took on a bitter edge. And then I told them. I knew about how much they'd been taking from their retirement fund and that I couldn't accept any more financial help from them. That's when things went sideways. How so? Dad exploded, saying I had no right to tell them how to spend their money. Mom kept insisting they were fine financially, that I was exaggerating the situation. When I mentioned the bank advisor had called you, they both went ballistic, accused you of interfering, of turning me against them. I winced. I was afraid of that. "It gets worse," Jake continued. "When I stood my ground, Dad actually suggested they might sell their house to give me more capital for the business." "What?" The shock in my voice was genuine. "They want to sell their home of 30 years for your tattoo shop? Crazy, right?" I shut that down immediately, told them absolutely not. That's when Mom started in on you again, saying if you would just do your part and sell your apartment, none of this would be necessary. A familiar knot of frustration tightened in my chest. "Of course she did." "I defended you," Jake said, quietly. "Told them it was completely unreasonable to expect you to sell your home when I'd never had to make that kind of sacrifice. That you'd worked harder for what you have than I ever had to. That the favoritism had been obvious our whole lives." The revelation that Jake had not only recognized the disparity, but had articulated it to our parents, left me momentarily speechless. How did they respond to that? About how you'd expect. Denial, deflection, claims that I was being manipulated. By you. Dad eventually told me to leave if I was going to take your side against them. The hurt in his voice was palpable. So I did. Left, I mean. "I'm sorry, Jake," I said, genuinely sympathetic despite all that had happened. "I know how hard their disapproval can be." "Yeah? Well." He made a sound that was half laugh, half sigh. "Welcome to the doghouse. Guess we're both disappointments now." There was something oddly comforting in the shared status, a sense of solidarity that had never existed between us before. "How are you feeling about it all?" "Honestly, kind of relieved," he admitted. "Like I've been living under this expectation that I'll always be the golden child, always getting special treatment, and now I don't have to play that role anymore. I can just be a normal adult who succeeds or fails on his own merits." His perspective resonated deeply with me. That's exactly it. The freedom to just be yourself without their expectations shaping everything you do. "The partnership deal closes on Friday," he continued. "Once that's done, I'm going to focus on making the shop work, really work, not just limp along on constant cash infusions from Mom and Dad." "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it sincerely for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship. "That takes courage." "Thanks." He sounded almost embarrassed by the praise. "Hey, I almost forgot to ask, how did your big interview go?" The fact that he'd remembered about my interview, especially after such a confrontation with our parents, touched me unexpectedly. "It went well, I think. Should hear something by the end of next week." "That's awesome, sis. You deserve it." He paused. "Listen, when this whole situation with Mom and Dad calms down a bit, maybe we could grab dinner sometime. Just the two of us? Might be nice to get to know each other as adults, without their influence hovering over everything." The invitation, tentative though it was, represented a potential new chapter in our relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than competition and resentment. "I'd like that, Jake. A lot." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, watching the sun set over the city skyline and reflecting on the unexpected turns the past week and a half had taken. My birthday, which had started as yet another reminder of my second-class status in the family, had somehow catalyzed a complete restructuring of those dynamics. Jake, who had spent his entire life as the favored child, was now experiencing the flip side of that coin, the withdrawal of approval when he failed to meet our parents' expectations. But rather than crumbling under it as I might have expected, he seemed to be finding his own kind of liberation in the experience. As for me, the invisible daughter who had spent decades trying to earn the recognition freely given to Jake, I was discovering that life outside the shadow of family expectations was brighter and more fulfilling than I'd imagined. My self-worth, for so long tied to external validation that never quite materialized, was finally becoming something I could generate from within. Dr. Levine had once told me that healthy boundaries weren't about shutting people out, but about defining the conditions under which they could be in your life. Perhaps that was what Jake and I were both doing now, redefining our relationship with our parents, not to punish them, but to create the possibility of healthier connections and the future. It wouldn't be easy. Decades of established patterns wouldn't change overnight, and there would likely be more difficult conversations and painful confrontations ahead. But for the first time, I felt equipped to face them, not as the desperate-to-please daughter, but as a woman who knew her own value and was unwilling to compromise it, even for family. That night, as I prepared for bed, I noticed my phone had no missed calls or texts from my parents. In the past, their silence would have filled me with anxiety and guilt. Now, it felt like space to breathe, to grow, to become more fully myself without the constant pressure to be what they wanted. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but I would face them as this new version of myself, the one who had finally found her voice at a birthday dinner that had been meant to silence her. And regardless of what happened with my family going forward, that voice would not be stilled again. The following Wednesday, exactly 1 week after my interview and nearly 2 weeks after the fateful birthday dinner, I received the call I'd been hoping for. The senior marketing director position was mine if I wanted it. The role came with a substantial salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and the opportunity to build and lead my own team. We were particularly impressed with your strategic vision and creative approach to problem solving, the HR director told me. The expansion team feels you're exactly what we need as we enter this new market. After accepting the offer and hanging up, I sat at my desk, a smile spreading across my face. This achievement was entirely my own, earned through my skills, dedication, and hard work. No one had helped me secure it, and no one could diminish its significance. My first instinct was still to call my parents and share the news, but I resisted. They hadn't reached out since Jake's confrontation with them a week ago, and I wasn't ready to break the silence on my end. Instead, I texted Mia, who responded with an abundance of exclamation points and an invitation to celebrate that weekend. As I was packing up to leave for the day, Elaine stopped by my desk, a knowing smile on her face. "I hear congratulations are in order." "Thank you," I said warmly, "and thank you again for your support throughout the process." "You've earned this, Tara. I hope you know that." She regarded me thoughtfully. "You seem different lately. More confident, more present, somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "A lot has changed in my personal life recently. Good changes, I think, but challenging ones. Those are often the most worthwhile kind." She squeezed my shoulder supportively. "We'll set up a transition plan for your current projects tomorrow. For now, go celebrate. This is a big step." On the drive home, I found myself reflecting on Elaine's observation. I did feel different, more solid in my sense of self, less reactive to others' expectations or disappointments. The boundary I'd established with my parents had extended to other areas of my life, making it easier to recognize my worth and advocate for my needs. As I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone rang. Jake's name appeared on the screen. Hello? Hey sis, just checking in. How'd the job thing turn out? I smiled at his enthusiasm. I got it. Just found out today. That's awesome. Senior marketing. Whatever, right? Sounds impressive. Senior. Marketing director. Yes, I start the transition next week. We should celebrate, he declared. The partnership deal closed on Monday, the business debts are cleared, and you're moving up in the world. Double celebration. That sounds nice. I agreed, genuinely pleased at the positive turn in his business situation. How about Saturday evening? Perfect. There's this new restaurant downtown I've been wanting to try. I'll make a reservation and text you the details. As we confirmed plans, I marveled at the ease of our interaction, without our parents as intermediaries, or the weight of old resentments and inequities between us. We were finding a new dynamic, something closer to true siblinghood than we'd ever experienced before. Oh, by the way, Jake added as we were about to hang up, I finally returned some of Mom and Dad's money. Not all of it, nowhere near, but what I could afford from the partnership funds. Dad tried to refuse it, but I insisted. How did that go? I asked, curious about our parents' reaction. About as well as you'd expect. Lots of protest, claims they didn't need it, then Mom crying about how her children don't need her anymore. He sighed. Classic guilt trip, but I stood firm, told them it was non-negotiable. I'm impressed, I said honestly. That couldn't have been easy. Easier than you might think, actually. Once you break the pattern once, it gets less scary to keep doing it. There was a new maturity in his voice that I was still getting used to. Anyway, they asked about you. My heart skipped a beat. What did they say? Just asked if I'd talk to you, how you were doing. I told them you were fine but busy with work. Didn't mention the promotion. Figured that was yours to share if you want to. Thanks, I said, appreciating his discretion. Have they said anything about reaching out to me directly? Not explicitly, but Mom did mention your birthday. Present is still at their house. I think that's her way of creating an excuse for contact. The revelation that there actually had been birthday presents, that the celebration hadn't been entirely a pretext for asking me to sell my apartment, was unexpectedly poignant. I see. Look, I'm not saying you should call them, Jake clarified, quickly. That's completely your decision. I just thought you might want to know they're not completely writing you off. I appreciate that. And I did, despite the complicated feelings it stirred up. I'm still processing everything, figuring out what kind of relationship I want with them going forward. I get that. No pressure either way. He paused. See you Saturday, 7 o'clock? I'll be there. After hanging up, I continued my drive home, mulling over this new development. My parents were asking about me, however indirectly. They had apparently gotten me birthday presents, despite the dinner being largely a setup for the request about my apartment. These small facts complicated the narrative I'd been constructing, that they saw me only as a resource for Jake, that they didn't value me as their daughter at all. The truth, as always with family dynamics, was more nuanced. They did love me in their imperfect, conditional way. They had favored Jake and neglected my needs, yes, but perhaps not out of malice or complete indifference. Their actions reflected their own limitations, their inability to see past established patterns or acknowledge the inequity they had created. Understanding this didn't mean I had to accept continued mistreatment or sacrifice my own well-being for their comfort. But it did open the possibility of a future relationship based on clearer boundaries and mutual respect, rather than a complete severance of ties. That evening, I called Dr. Levine and shared these reflections, along with the news of my promotion and improved relationship with Jake. It sounds like you're finding balance, she observed. Protecting yourself without completely shutting down the possibility of reconciliation. I think so, I agreed. I'm not ready to reach out to them yet, but I'm not closing that door forever either. That's a mature approach, Tara. and I'm particularly impressed with how you've navigated these changes while also pursuing your career goals. That shows remarkable resilience. Her validation warmed me, but I realized with some surprise that I didn't need it quite as desperately as I once might have. My confidence in my decisions was becoming more internally generated, less dependent on external approval. "What do you think the next step might be?" Dr. Levine asked. "With your parents, I mean." I considered the question carefully. "I think I need to decide what I want our relationship to look like going forward, assuming reconciliation is possible. What boundaries need to remain in place, what behaviors I can accept, what changes I need to see from them." "That's exactly right," she approved. "And remember, reconciliation doesn't mean returning to the old patterns. It means creating a new relationship that honors who you are now and what you need." As our session concluded, I felt a sense of clarity about the path ahead. It wouldn't be simple or straightforward, but I was equipped to navigate it, to make choices based on my own well-being rather than desperate attempts to earn love that should have been freely given. Saturday evening arrived, and with it, my dinner with Jake. The restaurant he'd chosen was upscale but comfortable, with soft lighting and well-spaced tables that allowed for private conversation. He was already seated when I arrived, looking more put together than his usual casual style in a button-down shirt and dark jeans. "Look at you, all professional," I teased as I took my seat across from him. He grinned. "Figured I should make an effort for my sister, the big-shot marketing director." The dinner that followed was unlike any interaction Jake and I had ever had. Without our parents present, without the competition for attention and approval that had defined our relationship for decades, we found ourselves genuinely enjoying each other's company. We shared stories from our respective workplaces, laughed about childhood memories that took on new meaning in light of our recent revelations, and tentatively explored what our relationship as adult siblings might look like. "You know, I always envied you growing up," Jake admitted as we were finishing dessert. "How smart you were, how together, how you never seemed to need anyone's help or approval." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Are you serious? I spent my entire childhood desperate for Mom and Dad's approval, trying so hard to be noticed, to be valued the way they valued you." "I knew they favored me," he acknowledged, "but I thought you were above it somehow, like you'd figured out some secret to being self-sufficient that I never could." "Not self-sufficient," I corrected. "Just resigned. I learned early that asking for what I needed usually led to disappointment, so I stopped asking, found ways to provide for myself instead." He nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I had the opposite experience. Anything I asked for, I got. Which sounds great, except it meant I never learned to survive without their safety net." "Until now," I pointed out. "Until now," he agreed. "And honestly, it's terrifying, but also kind of exhilarating. Like I'm finally becoming an actual adult, not just playing at it." The conversation continued, touching on our respective therapies. Jake had started seeing someone after our confrontation with our parents, our career aspirations, and eventually, the question of our parents. "Have you thought about reaching out to them?" Jake asked cautiously. "Not saying you should, just curious where your head's at with all of it." I considered the question, swirling the remains of my coffee. "I've been thinking about it a lot. Actually, part of me is still angry, not just about the apartment request, but about everything that led up to it. All the years of inequality and dismissal." "Understandable," he nodded. "But another part recognizes that they're flawed people who did the best they could with what they had." I sighed. Not great, obviously, but not deliberately cruel either, and holding on to anger indefinitely doesn't serve me. "So you think you'll talk to them eventually?" "Probably, yes. But on my terms, with clear boundaries about what I will and won't accept going forward." I looked up at him. "What about you? Where do things stand after returning the money?" He grimaced slightly. "Rocky. Dad's still barely speaking to me. Mom's cycling between guilt trips and attempts to act like nothing's changed. I'm keeping my distance for now, but I'm not cutting them off completely." "That sounds healthy," I observed. Working on it. He smiled wryly. It helps, having you to talk to about all this. Someone who understands exactly how crazy-making they can be? Agreed. I returned his smile. Who would have thought we'd end up allies after all these years as rivals? Maybe we needed to break free of their influence to see each other clearly, he suggested, without all the comparative judgment and different standards. It was an insightful observation, one that resonated deeply. Maybe this was the silver lining to the birthday dinner disaster. The chance for Jake and me to build a genuine sibling relationship, free from the toxic patterns our parents had established. As we parted ways after dinner, Jake hugged me. A real hug, not the perfunctory greeting we'd exchanged in the past. I'm proud of you, sis. For the promotion, sure, but mostly for standing up for yourself. It's about time someone in this family did. His words stayed with me on the drive home, a balm to decades of feeling invisible and undervalued. Whatever happened with our parents going forward, this new connection with Jake was something I would treasure, an unexpected gift born from finally saying enough to patterns that had hurt us both, albeit in different ways. The next morning, I woke to a text notification. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it was from my mother, the first direct contact since the confrontation at my apartment nearly 2 weeks earlier. Tara, we miss you. Your birthday gifts are still here. Can we talk, Mom? Simple, straightforward, with none of the guilt trips or accusations I might have expected. I sat with the message for a while, considering my response. The old Tara would have rushed to reply, eager to smooth things over regardless of the cost to her own well-being. The new Tara took her time, reflecting on what she truly wanted. After careful consideration, I texted back, I'm not ready for a face-to-face meeting yet, but I'm open to talking on the phone. Sunday afternoon would work for me. Her response came quickly. Sunday at 2 would be perfect. I'll have your father with me. We love you, Tara. Those last 4 words, so simple, so fundamental, yet so rarely expressed directly, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away, reminding myself that love without respect and equal treatment wasn't enough. But it was something to build on, perhaps. As I went about my weekend errands, I found myself mentally preparing for the conversation ahead. What boundaries would I maintain? What changes would I need to see to consider rebuilding our relationship? What patterns was I unwilling to fall back into? By Sunday afternoon, I felt centered and clear. I'd spoken with both Dr. Levine and Mia, refining my approach and strengthening my resolve. When my phone rang at precisely 2 p.m., I answered with a steady voice. Hello, Mom. Tara, honey. It's so good to hear your voice. She sounded genuinely emotional. Dad's here too, on speakerphone. Hi, Dad, I said, bracing myself for his typical gruffness. Tara? His voice was unexpectedly subdued. Good to talk to you. An awkward silence followed, broken finally by my mother. We've missed you, Tara. The house feels empty without our children visiting. I've needed some space, I said simply, to process everything that happened. We understand that, Mom said quickly, while Dad remained silent. And we've been doing some thinking too. About how we've treated you and Jake differently over the years. The acknowledgement, however tentative, was more than I'd expected. I've thought about that my whole life, I said quietly. Another silence, this one heavier with unspoken emotions. Jake says you got a promotion, Dad finally said, his tone hard to read. Senior position of some kind. Senior marketing director, I confirmed. I start next week. That's really something, Tara. The faintest note of pride crept into his voice. Always knew you had it in you. The compliment, so rare from my father, warmed me despite my determination to remain detached. Thank you. We should celebrate, Mom suggested eagerly. Maybe dinner out or... I'm not ready for that yet, I interrupted gently but firmly. I appreciate the thought, but I need more time. Of course, she backtracked immediately. Whatever you're comfortable with. Another silence, this one stretching uncomfortably until Dad cleared his throat. Tara, your mother and I, we owe you an apology. The words seemed to cost him considerable effort. We shouldn't have asked you to sell your apartment. That was wrong of us. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of all the inequities, but it was a start. And from my father, who rarely admitted to being wrong about anything, it was significant. Thank you for saying that, I said, careful to accept the apology without necessarily agreeing to move past the underlying issues. I appreciate it. We're proud of you, honey, Mom added, of everything you've accomplished, all on your own. We should have told you that more often. And shown it, I couldn't help adding. Actions speak louder than words, Mom. You're right, she conceded, surprising me again. And we want to do better. To show you how much we value you, not just tell you. I took a deep breath, seizing the opening. I want that too. But things can't go back to how they were. I need to know that you respect my boundaries, that you see Jake and me as equals deserving of equal support and consideration, that you won't try to guilt me when I make decisions you don't agree with. Of course we see you as equals, Mom protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Do you? I challenged gently. Think about it, Mom. Think about the financial help you've given Jake over the years compared to what you've offered me. Think about how you celebrate his accomplishments versus mine. Think about whose needs take priority when there's a conflict. The silence that followed told me they were actually considering my words rather than dismissing them outright. We never meant to make you feel less important, Mom finally said, her voice small. We just thought Jake needed more help, and you were always so capable, so independent. That's not fair, though, I pointed out. Being capable shouldn't mean getting less support. It should mean getting equal support and achieving even more because of it. Dad cleared his throat again. Your mother and I have been talking about this a lot since everything happened. And you're right, Tara. We haven't been fair to you. We've expected different things from you than from Jake, held you to different standards. His admission, so direct and unequivocal, momentarily stunned me into silence. We're not perfect parents, Mom added. We've made mistakes, serious ones it seems, but we love you both so much, and we want to do better. I appreciate that, I said carefully, but I need more than words. I need to see real changes in how you treat us both. Like what? Dad asked, and for once his tone wasn't defensive, but genuinely inquiring. Like not asking either of us to sacrifice our financial security for the other. Like celebrating our achievements equally. Like respecting our decisions as adults, even when you don't agree with them. I took another breath. And for me specifically, like not using guilt or emotional manipulation when I set boundaries. That seems reasonable, Dad conceded after a moment. It is reasonable, I affirmed, and I want you to know that I'm not cutting you out of my life. I just need this relationship to be healthier moving forward. We want that too, honey, Mom said, sounding tearful. More than anything, we miss you. I miss you too, I admitted, surprising myself with how true it was despite everything. But I needed this space to figure out what I need, what I'll accept, and what I won't. And have you? Figured it out, I mean? Dad asked. I'm getting there, I said honestly. It's a process. Well, we're here, Mom said. Whenever you're ready to try again, your birthday presents are still waiting. The mention of the presents brought a smile to my face despite myself. Maybe I could come by next weekend? Just for an hour or so? No big discussions, just a start. The relief in their voices was palpable. We'd love that, Mom said eagerly. Whatever time works for you. Sunday afternoon, I suggested. Around 3? Perfect, Dad confirmed. We'll see you then. After exchanging goodbyes, I ended the email call, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief that they seemed willing to acknowledge the inequities and work toward change. Caution born from years of experiencing their resistance to any criticism. Hope that perhaps we could build a healthier relationship moving forward, one where I was valued equally with Jake. I texted Jake a brief summary of the conversation, and his response was supportive but similarly cautious. Good first step. Stay strong with those boundaries. The week that followed was busy with the transition to my new role, leaving little time to overthink the upcoming visit with my parents. By Sunday, I felt prepared, clear on my boundaries, committed to maintaining them, but open to the possibility of healing. The drive to my parents' house felt different somehow. Where once I'd made this journey with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, anticipating disappointment or invisibility, now I approached it with a sense of calm purpose. I was no longer the child desperate for approval, but an adult woman making a conscious choice to engage with her family on new, healthier terms. Mom answered the door immediately, as if she'd been watching for my arrival. "Tara, honey," her arms opened for a hug, which I returned without the usual tension. Come in. Dad's in the living room." I followed her through the familiar hallway, noting the family photos on the wall with new eyes. There were more of Jake than of me, yes, but I was there. My graduation photo, a candid shot from a sea, family vacation, my formal portrait from when I'd made manager at my previous job. I existed in their visual history of our family, even if I'd often felt invisible in the day-to-day reality. Dad stood as I entered the living room, his expression a mix of uncertainty and hope that I'd rarely seen on his typically confident face. "Tara, good to see you." "Hi, Dad." I accepted his awkward half-hug, recognizing the effort it represented for a man who rarely initiated physical affection with me. Sit, Mom urged, gesturing to the couch. "Can I get you anything? Tea? Coffee?" "Tea would be nice," I said, settling onto the couch while Mom hurried to the kitchen. Dad sat in his usual armchair, fidgeting slightly with the remote control before setting it aside. "How's the new job going?" "It's good. Challenging, but in the right ways. I'm building my team now." He nodded, seeming genuinely interested. "Leading people is a whole different skill set from doing the work yourself, but you've always been good with people." The compliment, unexpected and specific, warmed me. "Thanks, Dad. It's definitely a learning curve, but I'm enjoying it." Mom returned with a tray of tea and the chocolate chip cookies she knew I loved. "Here we are. Now, after tea, we have your birthday presents. I know it's very belated, but better late than never, right?" "Right," I agreed, accepting a cup of tea. "How have you two been?" "Oh, managing," Mom said vaguely. "Your father's been working on the garden, and I've been volunteering more at the library. And we've been talking," Dad added unexpectedly. "About what you said, about how we've treated you and Jake differently." I nodded, appreciating his directness. "I'm glad to hear that." "We found a family therapist," Mom said, the words coming out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back. "We've had 2 sessions so far. Just us, not with you or Jake, to work on ourselves first." This revelation genuinely surprised me. My parents, especially my father, had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to listen to your problems. That they were actually seeing a therapist, voluntarily, suggested a level of commitment to change I hadn't dared hope for. "Wow, that's great," I managed, setting my teacup down carefully. "I think that could be really helpful." "It has been," Dad admitted. "Uncomfortable as hell, but helpful. Makes us see things we've been blind to for too long." "Like how we've treated you," Mom added softly. "Dr. Branson, that's our therapist. She's helped us understand how our different expectations for you and Jake have affected you both. Not just you, but Jake too. In different ways," Dad clarified, "but neither healthy in the long run." Their insights echoed what Dr. Levine had helped me understand about our family dynamics, that Jake had been harmed by their lower expectations. and constant bailouts just as I had been harmed by their higher expectations and lack of support. Different wounds from the same dysfunctional patterns. "I'm really glad you're doing that," I said sincerely. "It takes courage to look at ourselves that way." "We should have done it years ago," Mom said with a sigh. "Maybe we could have avoided." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the recent conflict and estrangement. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But we're here now, working on it. That counts for something." The conversation flowed more easily after that, touching on safer topics like my new work responsibilities, Dad's latest gardening projects, and local news. We carefully avoided discussions of Jake's business or financial matters, for which I was grateful. Those boundaries would need more time and trust before being tested. After tea, Mom brought out a small stack of wrapped presents. "I know it's silly to give birthday gifts weeks late, but we did choose these for you before everything happened." I accepted the gifts, touched despite myself by the gesture. The first was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover, exactly the kind I'd admired in a boutique Mom and I had visited months ago. She had remembered. "This is beautiful, Mom, thank you." The second gift was from Dad, a high-quality tool set for home repairs, something I'd mentioned wanting when I first moved into my apartment. Again, proof that they had been listening, at least sometimes, when I expressed my needs and wants. The final gift was from both of them, a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a key. "The key is symbolic," Mom explained, "for this new chapter in your life, with your new apartment and now your new job." I fastened it around my neck, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness of the gifts. They weren't extravagant like the gifts Jake typically received, but they were personal, chosen with care and attention to my preferences. "Thank you both," I said, touching the pendant lightly. "These are perfect." "We're glad you like them," Dad said, looking relieved. "We wanted you to know that we see you, Tara, even if we haven't always shown it the right way." The acknowledgement, so simple yet so profound, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. That means a lot to me. The visit ended shortly after, with promises to talk again soon and tentative plans for another get-together in a few weeks. As I drove home, the necklace a comforting weight against my skin, I reflected on the changes that had unfolded since my birthday dinner. My parents were in therapy, working to understand and change their dysfunctional patterns. Jake was finding his footing as a truly independent adult, no longer reliant on parental bailouts. And I was standing firmly in my worth, maintaining boundaries that protected my well-being while remaining open to healing and growth in my family relationships. None of it was perfect or complete. There would be setbacks and old patterns to confront, moments of doubt and frustration. But the foundation was shifting, the dynamics evolving in ways that offered hope for healthier connections moving forward. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I touched the key pendant again, appreciating its symbolism in ways my mother hadn't even intended. This was indeed a new chapter, not just in my career or living situation, but in how I engaged with my family and ultimately with myself. The invisible daughter was visible now, not just to her parents, but to herself. The patterns of a lifetime were being rewritten, slowly but steadily, with each boundary maintained and each step toward mutual respect and understanding. And it had all begun with a birthday dinner that wasn't really about my birthday at all, but had ended up giving me the most meaningful gift I could have received: the courage to finally stand up for myself and demand the recognition and respect I deserved. As I unlocked my apartment door, the home I had earned through my own efforts and now knew I would never sacrifice for anyone else's poor choices, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them as this new version of myself, visible, valued, and uncompromising in my self-worth. The journey wasn't over, but the direction had irrevocably changed. And for that, despite everything, I found myself grateful for that fateful birthday dinner that had set it all in motion.